everyone, and welcome. Our service this morning is going to look a little different from usual. Some of our staff are on vacation this week. Others had to step away unexpectedly this morning. They'll all be back next week. For today, our service will be in a simpler summary format. We're not able to share slides or screens today, so you'll find hymn lyrics and the opening and closing words in the chat box. Thank you, as ever, for your patience as we all keep on learning new things in this digital space. And welcome.
Let's sing together this morning. Not my father, not my mother, but it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Not my father, but my mother, it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Not the stranger, not my neighbor, but it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Not the stranger, not my neighbor, but it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved. We're on the road to freedom. We shall not be moved. We're on the road to freedom. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved. Black, brown, and white together, we shall not be moved. Black, brown, and white together, we shall not be moved, just like a tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved. When our burden's heavy, we shall not be moved. When our burden's heavy, we shall not be moved, just like a tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved. Kumbaya, my Lord, kumbaya. Kumbaya, my Lord, kumbaya. Kumbaya, my Lord, kumbaya. Oh Lord, kumbaya. Someone's crying, Lord, kumbaya. Someone's crying, Lord, kumbaya. Someone's crying, Lord, kumbaya. Oh Lord, kumbaya. Come by here, my Lord, come by here. Come by here, my Lord, come by here. Come by here, my Lord, come by here. Oh Lord, kumbaya.
Good morning and welcome everyone to White Bear Unitarian Universalist Church. This is a congregation in the free faith tradition, a community of youth, adults, and children. We're bound not by creed, but by covenant. I'm Victoria Safford. I use she, her pronouns. We are starting to return to our beloved church home with circle round gatherings today and next Sunday at 4 o'clock, and one more courtyard gathering and flower communion this week on Wednesday. Watch the e-news to sign up. The circle here this afternoon still has plenty of spaces. You can register online or put a note in the chat or send me an email. It's about an hour of conversation together. This month, we are delighted to welcome beloved guest ministers back to our pulpit. Today's guest is the Reverend Laura Smitzik. Reverend Laura serves Michael Servetus Unitarian Society in Fridley. She received her MDiv from United Theological Seminary and previously served as Minister of Membership here. Laura's eclectic career has included serving as acting director of UU Wellspring and the Minnesota Unitarian Universalist Social Justice Alliance, Moose Jaw. She was executive director of Project 515 and Rainbow Families, two statewide organizations serving LGBTQ families, and she worked in career development at Hamlin and McAllister. Reverend Laura's core UU identity comes from her membership and leadership at Unity Church Unitarian in St. Paul, where she and her partner Linda raised their two sons. Our music today is from Carol Coet, and Anna Garris is behind the scenes with us, making everything possible this morning. You're all invited to join us at 11:15 for Cyber Social Hour. It's an informal half hour of conversation and fellowship. It's in a separate Zoom space, and we'll put the link in the chat. Welcome to our church. Together, we grow our souls and serve the world in love.
Come in. Come into this place we make holy by our presence. Come in with all your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes, for here you need not hide nor pretend, nor be anything other than who you are and who you are called to be. Come into this space where we can heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into this space where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, the compassionate is expected. Come into this space. Together, we make it a holy space.
These words for chalice lighting come from Mara Coyle, a member of our congregation. She wrote them many years ago. Show up, speak up, quiet down, listen. Recognize the wisdom around you. Feel the pain, sit with it, let it go. Believe, doubt, question, challenge, honor the past, envision the future, celebrate the now. Be grateful, remorseful, forgiving. Clean up your mess, hold doors for others, invite them in. Show up, speak up, quiet down, listen. Agitate, appreciate, congregate, consecrate. Let the sun shine in and expose the darkness. Throw back your head and let your song be heard. Know that you are not alone. There are others who show up, speak up, quiet down, listen. I light the chalice in gratitude. Please join me in the opening words. You'll find them in the chat. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. The hymn is Covenant.
To cross the river, to blur the line between your memory of sorrow, my fear of the unknown. We have the courage to wait
Today's offering supports the vision, work, and programs of our congregation as a standing line item in this year's operating budget. It enables us to share our services in digital space like this, and it's allowing lay leaders and staff to make long-awaited plans to gather here in person in September. We hope that you'll be generous. First reading today is from the Reverend Mary Augusta Safford, minister in the 19th century. Great oversoul and inter heart, of whom we feel ourselves a part, to whom all souls forever tend, our Father, Mother, nearest friend. This church with love to thee we bring, and while our spirits inly sing, we pray that it may ever be a home for all who seek thee. The home of faith in all things true, a faith that seeks the larger view, the home of love that yearns to bless, the home of truth and righteousness. Long may it stand, the outward sign of that indwelling life divine, which makes thy children truly free and draws them ever nearer thee. And from one of Mary Safford's sermons, heed no ignoble questionings about popularity, wealth, or fashion, but obey your heavenly vision. Be loyal to the truth you see, bravely stand by your convictions, and work for the human good.
Listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters.
It's so lovely to be back and to see the sanctuary. I wish I could be with all of you and see your faces. We're all just making our way through this, but it's delightful to get to be with you this Sunday. Last week, a congregant at the church I served preached on universalism. His words have planted an idea of creating heaven on earth in my mind. It's a phrase that I've heard offered during a greeting from a Unitarian Universalist minister in Transylvania when a group of us from the Unity Church Unitarian went to visit our partner church. And they're the words that have been spoken and echoed by theologians and people of faith throughout time, creating heaven on earth. I've also been returning to some words from a reading that my congregant read last week. It was one by Martin Luther King. And the two words that have stuck with me is isness and oughtness. They captured my imagination. I found the statement by King, which was actually part of an acceptance speech for an award that he was receiving. I stumbled through the male language of the original quote, so instead I have translated the statement so it feels more inclusive to my ears and invites me in without obstacles. I hope it does the same for you. You can easily find this quote online if you'd like to see the original language. Here's what Dr. King said. I accept this award today with an abiding faith in America and an audacious faith in the future of humankind. I refuse to accept despair as the final response to the ambiguities of history. I refuse to accept the idea that the isness of humankind's present nature makes them morally incapable of reaching up for the eternal oughtness that forever confronts them. I refuse to accept the idea that humans are mere flotsam and jetsam in a river of life, unable to influence the unfolding events which surround them. I refuse to accept the view that humankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and kinship can never come around as a reality. Man, I loved hearing those words this week. I think we all need to pay attention to the isness and the oughtness. So today I come with a story about the Iowa Sisterhood, women who sparked a spread of faith across the heartland. They refused to accept the isness of the churches and church leadership of their time, and in doing so, they continue to inspire us today. My guess is that many of you have heard this story before. I have as well, but I never grow tired of it. And each time I return to it, I feel a new connection to the present time. Paulie Peterson is an author of The Stirring of the Nation's Heart, 18 stories of prophetic Unitarian and Universalist in the 19th century. And she also has a number of biographical stories for the Unitarian Universalist Association's Tapestry of Faith curriculum, which is posted online. She's a member of First Parish Church in Concord, Massachusetts. And here is a biographical sketch that she wrote titled Eliza Tupper Wilkes, Writing for Faith, Hope, and Love. My hope is that it will bring us to the time and place that we are focusing on today. I want to add that I'm not certain when this sketch was written, but it does not honor or acknowledge that the land and the people referred to in this story were pioneers, people who came to these lands thinking it was theirs for the taking and the owning. The story of the Western expansion is one of progress for those who came to this land after Indigenous people had lived here for a long time. So take a moment and sit back. You can close your eyes if you like to just imagine things at a different time. Imagine traveling by horse and buggy along a dusty dirt roads in summer, fording streams and swatting mosquitoes and wearing clothes with long sleeves and a high collar, or making the same trip on icy roads beginning in the dark of a cold winter morning, whipped by bitter wind and sleet stinging your face. Imagine that a congregation is waiting for you when you reach their destination. You preach a sermon, you lead hymns, you meet with the church officers, you give counsel to troubled parishioners, and help organize a church supper or an evening discussion group. And then at the end of a long day, perhaps you receive news of a death in another town, and you know that you must soon be on the road again to comfort a grieving family. A day like this may have been a typical Sunday for a Universalist minister in the group known as the Iowa Sisterhood. These ministers were among the first female ministers in the United States. They endured many hardships to bring liberal religion to the small communities that were springing up throughout the Midwest after the Civil War. Eliza Tupper Wilkes led the way in this new style of ministry, and this is her story. Eliza Tupper was born in Maine in 1844. Her father was a Baptist minister, and her mother was a writer and an editor. This is really unusual because in those days, most women married and they rarely had professions outside of the home. When Eliza was 5, her family moved to Iowa. It was a territory that gained statehood only a few years earlier, and people were flocking to this promising new state on the rolling prairie. They say that its population had doubled from 75,000 when Eliza was born to more than 150,000 by the time her family moved there. Pioneer life suited the Tupper family well. A good high school education was hard to find on the frontier, though. So Eliza went back to Maine in 1860 to live with her grandfather and go to school. She returned to Iowa 3 years later and began studying at a new Baptist college. She wanted to become a missionary. And after graduation, she took a job as a teacher in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. And while she was there, her ideas about religion began to change. The Baptist religious teachings about hellfire and damnation no longer seemed true to her. To the horror of her family, she decided to become a Universalist. And when she was baptized in her new faith, she quipped that she had left the devil behind. The Universalist Church was the first denomination to welcome women ministers. This was lucky for Eliza Tupper. Her interest in missionary work was still strong, and she soon began preaching from the pulpit of the Mount Pleasant Universalist Church. She moved to Wisconsin, where she had her own pulpit, and while in Wisconsin, she met William Wilkes, a young law clerk, and they married in 1869. The United States was a country on a move in those days, at least those pioneers, and by 1869, you could take a train across the entire continent from east to west. More and more people were striking out for new territories in the West, and young people like Eliza and her husband had a world of opportunity before them. The couple moved to Rochester, Minnesota, where Eliza was ordained as a Universalist minister in 1871. She served there for 3 years. Those of you who remember Luke, he is now serving up in Rochester, and when we went to his ordination, we heard some fiery words by Eliza Tupper Wilkes. So I recommend that if you have a chance, go to that church and take in some of that history. Then they moved on to Colorado, where William became a lawyer and Eliza was now a young mother of a son. And she organized a new Universalist church in Colorado Springs and preached there regularly to get it started. They say that high altitude of Colorado Springs proved to be bad for her health, though. So in 1878, the family was on the move again, and they traveled the Dakota Territory and settled in the frontier town of Sioux Falls. Eventually, there were 6 children in the family, and unlike other prosperous husbands in those days, Eliza's husband approved of her career. He willingly paid for household help and tutors for the children so that Eliza could continue her missionary work. Eliza was interested in many kinds of social reform, but she dedicated most of her life to the establishment of new churches. She was a church planter that we might see in these times. She knew that among the pioneers on the frontier, there were many free-thinking people who hungered to hear the liberal message, and that there were few places to hear it. From her home base in Sioux Falls, Eliza organized 7 churches in South Dakota, Iowa, and Minnesota. Her plan was to turn each one over to another minister after it was established, and as she moved on to establishing the next. But ministers were in short supply, and so often she needed to serve several churches at once. Reverend Eliza Tupper Wilkes spent many years on the circuit, traveling from town to town, ministering to as many people as she could. On Sundays, she often preached in Rock Rapids, Iowa in the morning, and then she traveled 15 miles to Laverne, Minnesota for an afternoon service. Nowadays, it doesn't sound like much of a trip, but for Eliza, it was a long and arduous journey over difficult roads. Eliza Tupper Wilkes was a trailblazer, but she was not alone. Other women were establishing Universalist congregations in Iowa and in the surrounding states. Women ministers encouraged other women to come into the ministry, and the sisterhood grew. They often faced people who were hostile to the idea of women in the ministry, but they proved to be so effective that their congregations in the Midwest and the West quickly grew. After Eliza started a new congregation, she always preferred to hand it over to another woman minister. She believed that the women from the local areas were more competent as prairie pastors than the men who would get sent out from the East. The women worked harder and were more willing to accept the lower wages that struggling homesteaders could pay. They better understood their parishioners' lives, and they were more likely to talk about things in the same kind of way as the people they served, unlike the young men who were sent out to the frontier fresh from college. Along with their religious message of optimism and hope, the women ministers tended to bring a comforting home-like quality to church meetings that attracted both men and women. And beyond their religious duties, they often organized cultural and social events that were much appreciated by people living isolated rural lives. Eliza was delighted when Carrie Bartlett, a dedicated and energetic and well-educated young minister, agreed to take over the pulpit at Sioux Falls Unity Church. Eliza had founded the church, and it was where her family attended services. On Sundays, when Reverend Carrie Bartlett was not in the pulpit, Eliza or a guest minister from the Iowa Sisterhood would usually preach in her place. It said that one Sunday, Reverend Bartlett traded pulpits with a male colleague instead. And Eliza's little daughter, Queenie, was astonished. She exclaimed in amazement, "Look, Mama, there's a man up in the pulpit." That last story of Queenie is often cited by authors as they write about the Iowa Sisterhood. I love it because it demonstrates just how prevalent these women were in the ministry of our churches. They were so common in that brief period of time that a young child knew no others. I'm having a feeling that those of you who have raised children at White Bear know no other either. I've always been amazed by the story of these determined women of faith who did what was needed in order to bring universalism to the Midwest. Although the story I read today was about Eliza Tupper Wilkes, the founders and the leaders of the Iowa Sisterhood were Mary Safford and Eleanor Gordon. There's great stories about them as well. They were at the center of a network of 21 women who served congregations in a region from the late 1800s to the early 1900s. These were women who had a strong, undeniable call to ministry, but their path was far from easy. They were willing to serve in locations that their male peers on the East Coast refused to serve, and their ministry went against the grain of popular Christianity. It was physical and radical, missionary, holistic, and a determined ministry. The leadership met the needs of the communities in a way that their counterparts on the East, where long, learned, intellectual sermons were the main focus and were the expectation of ministry. These women ministers saw church life expanding beyond Sunday mornings and into the rest of the week. They understood the importance of rituals that mark transitions of life, and these rituals were equally as important as the sermons and Sunday services. And they weren't shy about taking their feminist lens to their work. For instance, they took out the part in the wedding vows that spoke of women serving husbands. They believed relationships worked when there was equality. The ministers in the Iowa Sisterhood rose at a time when ministry was a profession for men and unheard of for women. The predominant Christian belief was fueled by the text of 1 Corinthians, where Paul wrote, "As in all the congregations of the saints, women should remain silent in churches. They're not allowed to speak, but must be in submission as the law says. If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home, for it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church." Women were not able to attend the predominant theological and intellectual training grounds for men, which was Harvard at the time, and Charles William Eliot, the president who transformed Harvard between 1869 and 1909, he moved it from this strong regional college to a world leader. He was firm on preserving this institution for men. He opposed the presence of women in Harvard classrooms, and instead he actively chose to seek out males who were to come into the classrooms regardless of their calling or their intellectualism. As the leader in Unitarianism had no idea in women as well, men filled the pulpits of all the churches on the East. But these women didn't take no for an answer, and they certainly did not believe that the words of Paul were those of God. They were steeped in biblical criticism. They absorbed the writings of the transcendentalists, who actually caused a lot of friction in the Unitarian churches in their time, and they leaned into the writings of Unitarian ministers who placed social action in society at the center of their ministries. Their theology took the edge of the Unitarian Universalist and Universalist counterparts of the day, and they pushed them further. They were more radical and inclusive. God didn't intervene in people's lives. Human agency and ethical responsibility were necessary for salvation through action rooted in love. They took the centrality of human experience as sacred text from the transcendentalist and the words of Emerson, who said, "Dare to love God without mediator or veil." For them, Jesus was understood to be a human example of principled living, not set apart, and his actions were equally achievable by all of us. They believed in evolution, and they taught Darwinism in their religious education classes. While one may see the phrase salvation through Christ our Lord on the walls of churches in the East Coast, the guiding words on the church walls that Mary Safford served were freedom, fellowship, character, and religion. I see the echoes of the Iowa sisterhood theologies in this congregation and in the one I serve as well today. I wish I could say that the Iowa sisterhood legacy was the beginning of ministry by women that expanded to where it is today, but this ended up being a grand experiment instead. At a time when church attendance was declining, Samuel A. Eliot, who served as the first president of the American Unitarian Association, doubled down on recruiting men and became a gatekeeper who essentially put an end to women in ministry for a period of time. His biography in the online Dictionary of Unitarian and Universalist includes the description of his presidency. It says that the American Unitarian Association's 1896 yearbook listed 26 women ministers. But the women ministers and their congregations, especially in the often raw and rapidly developing West, tended to emphasize family virtues, hospitality, and practical hands-on service to community. Eliot saw these domestic themes as too small for an age of scientific progress and efficiency. He thought women unsuited for professional life, and he wanted for Unitarian churches vigorous and manly ministers qualified to take up the larger issues of the time and to speak from their pulpits with authority. He didn't value the remarkable accomplishments of women ministers, especially in starting and nurturing their own thriving churches in the Midwestern towns far from Harvard. The new Ministerial Fellowship Committee adopted credentialing requirements which undercut women who could not attend university. The Unitarian the American Unitarian Association headquarters snubbed women's requests for assistance, or when they visited Boston, citing management issues to justify his refusals to help them or their churches. His leadership's gender discrimination effectively weeded out Unitarian women ministers for the next 50 years. And the story of the Iowa sisterhood was lost, like much history, as we are starting to learn or have been learning for quite some period of time. It was erased from the history of the Unitarian Universalism for decades. And it wasn't until the 1990s when Cynthia Grant Tucker's scholarly book titled The Prophetic Sisterhood, Liberal Ministers of the Frontier, 1880 through 1930, that this story of the Iowa sisterhood emerged. Now it is required reading for all who are moving into Unitarian Universalist ministry. We're coming to understand the role of ancestors and the impact of history, whether it's remembered or it's just deeply hidden in our psyches. I like to think of this area of the Midwest holding the story of the Iowa sisterhood and impacting all of us who are part of Unitarian Universalism in this area. I like to think of children like Queenie, who in her youth saw only women in the pulpit, that she was growing up to emulate their strength and their determination and leadership, and passing that on to the next generation of children and families. Certainly, the strength of this fellowship movement echoes their work, as does the emphasis on ethics and humanism. When I allow myself to be immersed in their story, the Iowa sisterhood grounds my spirit, and it plants roots of faith in our Midwestern lives. I'll close with words of Mary Safford, who speaks to our heritage. I couldn't help but hear the echo of Mara's words today, but here are Mary's words. But for the loyalty of truth, the heroic self-sacrifice, the unfaltering devotion to those who were true to their convictions in times of the past, you and I would not enjoy today that religious history, which is our priceless heritage. We must realize our debt to the past, the debt that we cannot face save by being true and helpful in the present. Open your heavenly vision. Be loyal to the truth you see, bravely stand by your convictions, and work for the human good. Then life will grow divine. May it be so, and amen.
May it be so, Laura. Thank you. Thank you for being with us today. It is so good to be with you, even in this strange space. Friends, let's take a breath. For a few moments in the quiet of the summer morning, let's hold silence together, for we are together, even if apart for just a little longer. No matter how or when each of us has come into this tradition, this Unitarian Universalist tradition, this congregation, no matter how we first arrived or when, we know that what we came to was not just a community of beloved other people, not only a place to call home, to rest the weary spirit, gather strength, greet the holy in a whisper or a task, a prayer or revelation. We know that what we came to here was not only the present moment of healing and hope, a place to be at home, but also a deep history, stories, a cloud of witnesses, stretching back in time, legacies, this beautiful, difficult, generous way of shaping the life of the Spirit. This is also what home is. This inheritance of radical inclusion, ready forgiveness, responsible freedom, reverent thoughtfulness, and hope. It's the wild imagination of the Unitarians and the breaking, boundless Universalist heart. What we've all come to here and become part of is a noble history. May we honor it in lives of service, principle, and joy. What we've also come to is the future. A church is a house of history, safeguarding ancient dreams, and it holds as well this boundless possibility. We hold the stories of the past for just a little while and cherish them, and then pass them on in words and deeds to those who will come next. May we honor the ancestors and also the descendants who will follow us here, whose names and faces we may never know, but whose lives and dreams and happiness we cherish as fiercely as our own lives. We're all here for just a little while, to listen for wisdom, to act bravely, shaping justice and joy from the clay of our days, and pass it on with compassion. With gratitude, may we serve the world and grow our souls in love. Amen. The hymn is Lead with Love.
You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Don't give up hope, you're not alone. Don't you give up, keep moving on. Sometimes you're scared and I'm scared too, and here I am right next to you. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Lift up your eyes, don't you despair. Look straight ahead, your path is there. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love.
Please join me in the closing words. You'll find them in the chat box. May peace dwell within our hearts and understanding in our minds. May courage steel our will and love of truth forever guide us. Thank you, friends, for being here today. Thank you for your patience as we figure out ever more new things in Zoom space. And thank you especially to Reverend Laura Smidzik for returning to our pulpit today. We hope to see all of you at Cyber Social Hour and then later today, if you like, in person here at church. We're sending you love from all of us in Minneapolis, Stillwater, St. Paul, and from 328 Maple Street in Mahtomedi. Stay well, everyone. Amen.